following program is brought to you in living color.
Anyhow, for those of you who joined us before, we have Roger with us today, which you're already familiar with. The other gentleman that we have currently in center is David Alexander. Like Roger, David is one of my patrons that's been around for a while. You guys met Michael a couple of weeks back, and you're going to start seeing more and more of these folks because one, in many cases, in David's instance, he's a lot more interesting than I am. With that in mind, I guess go ahead, David. You can introduce yourself, tell them what you like or whatever. We are 11 minutes to starting the episode.
All right. Well, I am live from Houston. Actually, Mission Control is sitting right behind me. Welcome to NASA. I am Dr. David Alexander. I am a flight surgeon. I'm also as advanced as a crew surgeon. I was the first shuttle and ISS dual certified mission control surgeon of the cadre. So I've been around for a while. I am currently the principal medical officer for the Moon to Mars program and the Gateway program. So my whole thing is to make sure that everything is human rated for the human and the lunar gateway orbital plot for Artemis mission, and then do all the experiments and stuff like that to help get us to Mars. And so basically we're taking all the foundational stuff. So I was on console for Artemis 1, the mission there, and I will be on console as the one of the lead console surgeons for Artemis 2 and Artemis missions. So with that short introduction, back to you, Jim.
All right. So needless to say, for those of you who are joining us for the meeting and seeing David for the first time, he has definitely been probably one of the more entertaining patrons that we have. He's always telling us stories that, that allow us to be vicarious, live a little closer to Star Trek, I think. So, for those of you who have never watched a watch party with us before, welcome. We are very, very happy to have you here with us. We are going to be watching the Galileo 7. Now, if you want to watch at home and hear the sound and everything else, you can go to watch.trek-world.com. It will take you to Pluto TV, and it'll take you specifically to the Galileo 7. There is no registration required. You do not need to give them any information. You can just simply click your way through and watch it along with us. It will be shown with commercials. Or if you want to watch it on Paramount Plus, or you have your DVDs or Blu-rays, you can watch along with us as well. Running time's about 58 minutes. And every 30 seconds, the screen that you're looking at, since I started here, is going to a new slide. And so you're going to see it update in the background there. We've tried it at different intervals for those of you folks wondering about this. But the issue that we have is that you can use copyrighted footage on a documentary or on something like that, where you can actually make an argument that is first use doctrine. Okay. You're adding value. You're doing commentary. You're critiquing. They take a much more restricted approach if that can be possibly confused with rebroadcasting their signal for free to the general public. So YouTube's very, very strict about that. And basically, if you're lucky, they will take the video down. If you're not lucky, you'll get a strike. And 3 strikes, the channel is gone. So I've adopted the 30-second film clip thing to get us where we need to go. If you remember the old-fashioned, we are experiencing technical difficulties, Roger and David, you run with it for a few minutes here, and I'm going to see what I can do to figure out why we're not getting anything.
I wanted to throw out Jim's comment earlier about the new Galileo video. I've been watching Jim's channel since he was Silver Nashville back in the day. And some of the earliest videos that I watched were the Galileo videos that Jim put out. And I think he put out 4 separate videos. And the last video mentioned there was going to be a new video coming out that was all inclusive and have everything on it. And so when you see me, pumping my fist when he's talking about the new one coming out and actually putting it on DVD, I have been hounding Jim, and I don't mean it to sound negative, but I've been encouraging him, not hounding, encouraging Jim. But he does do this to put it on DVD because there are old fashioned folks like myself that as much as I like streaming, I like a physical hard copy of it that I can throw it in anytime when I feel like it. And trust me, all of Jim's hits on his Galileo video, probably a big chunk of those are me because I watch them over and over. I have learned so much from the history of that prop from Jim's videos that I think that's what I enjoy the most panel, and still do, is that he goes into such detail and is able to research and dig up so much background on these props and the show itself that I don't know of anybody who does. So looking forward to the new video and looking forward to being on DVD. So David, I'll turn it over to you. Absolutely, and basically, Correct World was it's just like as soon as I saw the first one was it's an addiction, yeah, that popped up, and basically you sit there and it's just like, when's a new update? When's a new update? When's a new update? And then the research is just phenomenal, and the background is just incredible, and not only open source, but interviews and behind the scenes stuff that Jim's been able to get, and it's just like, ooh, who did he talk to this week? And and it's just like, stand by for further updates. And Jim's done a phenomenal job and stuff like that. So it's almost a forensic study Jim does on you, and it's just I don't like I said, I don't know of anybody who is able to dig up the things that he digs up on this and the research and is able to get those interviews and things like that.
I can actually say, in all honesty, on that particular tack, I'm very aware of this now, meaning especially with Nashville, I was not. But no one, period, whether it's one of the Roddenberry podcasts or Inglourious Experts or Shuttle Pod One, we have some extraordinary created channels run by Star Trek professionals. Larry Nemeczek has Trek Files, I think it is. But anyhow, we have some extraordinary people who have information that is vastly nobody has ever actually exercised the ability to put something on their podcast or their channel with the sole intention of getting the viewers to respond back and comment and emails and stuff with their stories. And so, therefore, the one thing that I have stumbled into with Trek World that the other channels did not ever really stumble in upon is the vast amount of information that comes to me from people like you and I watching this that maybe one of the first people that contacted me was somebody whose grandfather worked at the Smithsonian when the Enterprise was being delivered to them. So they had Polaroids that I'd never seen before. And unfortunately, I didn't ask for any copies. They were the family did not want the pictures spread, but there were a lot of very interesting photographs that were done when it was still in storage, and they were doing the initial restoration in 70, end of 74, beginning 75. So I think that we kind of lucked into it with this channel that because of the ability to collect information, then it makes it easier for us to dig up things that other people haven't dug up before. And it's just the way it's turned out. Ronald asked a really good question, though. Let's go back to that here. So, for those of you who possibly have been living under a YouTube rock for the past week, OTOY released the next of their amazing animation packages where they are reproducing not only trying to duplicate, the Enterprise and its people and missions inside this 3D world, inside this archive for Rod, but they're also capable of telling new stories or filling in the blank. Unification was released about a week ago. It's about 5 minutes long. If you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend go out and watch it. It's astounding. It's really heavily William Shatner oriented, Captain Kirk oriented, and appears to be there's no text, there's no script. It's just music that plays. But to me, it looks like the classic, okay, this begins a split second after he passes in Star Trek Generations, because that's the first Captain Kirk we see in the clothes he was wearing. And then he's apparently making his way through into the light of the afterlife, which was handled beautifully. Robin Curtis reprised her role as Savick. And then, of course, Robin directs him to continue on. And it literally is, let's enter the light. And of course, there's one last pit stop, and that is you have to reunite Kirk and Spock. And so they tie together that beautifully. I was absolutely amazed, not necessarily at the quality of the animation, but the quality of the performances. If you watch Kirk, and this is all Shatner, okay, and this was actually accomplished by, in all honesty, They did film Shatner, Bill Now, in front of a green screen to be used for to be used for like the reference work they used in the other gentlemen, which is why when they pull the camera back, the Kirk that we see walking across the screen is his body shape doesn't really match Bill's. I think his hair is a slightly different phrase. But I first wrote that off as being a CGI artifact no matter what. But then I was able to actually see somebody behind the screenshot. These guys have done an amazing job. And the mannerisms that you see Kirk do all the way through this, it's like you'll see his mouth or his head move or expression twitch a certain way that we have seen a million times. But then there's no line. It's like he gets stopped. He goes to that point, and then it ebbs away, and you go to the next one. Absolutely amazing. When they recreated him as he appeared in the original series, I could not believe the what we were seeing. I had no idea how advanced this is. David, did they talk about this at all when you guys were up there?
I actually got to see the premiere of it with Shatner. Shatner had not seen it yet, and so I actually got to see Shatner's first reaction to it, and they actually talked about the production, and then right there was Robin Curtis, and so the Robin Curtis, the Spock is another OTOY video and stuff like that. So it's an allegory to that, but they actually discussed it, and then so they showed the film, and Shatner just sat there, and it just just hands and across the chest, and he just long pause, and he just went wow, and then just stopped. Half the people were crying. It was just emotionally moving, and then they went into the production, and Sam Witwer, the actor, actually went through hours and hours of mimicking the face through all the, actually imitating all the film footage and stuff like that. But it was 4 hours of interview that Shatner had done, and they took all of that and then put that overlaid in there, and it's all CGI. It's not AI, it's CGI. And so basically all the facial movements and stuff like that is basically CGI projection of Shatner's face, and it's close. The actor that did Nimoy was he almost looked exactly like Nimoy. And they demonstrated some of the, how, the facial movements and stuff like that, and actually went through the pixelations and things like that. And it's absolutely incredible. And basically James Cawley went, here's the future adventure of Star Trek. And yeah, there's more coming down and stuff like that. But the Shatner just sat there, and there was dead silence and crying. And I sat there, and you couldn't speak. And it's just like, wow. For half of it's just like, wow, 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 wow. And then, but it was powerfully moving. And then Robin Curtis standing right there, moved up right beside Shatner. And it was just like, oh my heaven. And it was just.
If you have any videos, photos, or documents that you would like to donate to us, please feel free to send them to jim@trek-world.com or submit them via the web at submit.trek-world.com.
Incredible to see all that.
It was powerful. I mean, I don't think, I know you had sent the link, David, to me, and I watched it, and I sent a comment back like 2 minutes later. It's like, okay, where the hell did I put the Kleenex? It was an emotional, to me, it was almost like an emotional gut punch. It just hit so much harder than you would.
It reminded me, guys, of sitting in the theater on Star Trek II at the end when Spock saved the ship. It's that huge baseball-sized lump in my throat for the top part of the movie, and trying to hold back tears. I mean, that's the experience I had with this video. It was just amazing, amazing.
But yeah, wait to see what comes next for them and where they're going with it.
I see Manley's comment, and I felt the same way, Manley. I was like, okay, they did a wonderful job of Kirk and Spock there, but love to see McCoy there because they were a trio, in the series throughout.
But he hasn't passed yet. So remember, Coy is in the next generation. So he's seeing the Enterprise D. McCoy's not there yet, so that's got to be, we haven't seen McCoy passing, and they alluded to that and stuff like that. So
You guys have read The Bicentennial Man by Isaac Asimov? Yeah, I wondered the same thing with them. Yeah, I'm very excited over it. I was very happy. I'm glad to see it go. I think one of the reasons maybe, Manly, that they haven't touched on D just yet is all of the characters they picked to this date Spock, the yeoman Colt, I guess it is from the Cage. All the actor, all the things they had chosen to reanimate. The actors and actresses that played the person, okay, they're still around to do some of the motion capture of the head and faces and stuff. I mean, so we've seen, for instance, we've seen there are OTOY packages published where OTOY is talking with Walter and George. The way OTOY works with things, if they were there talking and we see a video of them talking, I guarantee you they were there scanning as well. We saw that actually happen. And this is irony for those of you who don't necessarily know the current status of the lawsuit. But Otoy was present on April 1st, and they posted a video almost immediately after April 15th when the embargo lifted from Heritage, Roddenberry and Heritage for allowing them to be there as part of the authentication. And then of course the video immediately he shows while he's talking or typing about that, the video he shows is the clip of them actually three-dimensional the model, which from the Star Trek point of view, from Rod's point of view, my point of view, great. Use that opportunity because if something happens to the model, we may have another opportunity to recreate it as it is. Now, unfortunately, there's a wrinkle that video caused, which is now showing up in the lawsuit. And I'll be doing another video on this. But if those of you who are wondering about what has happened, I think the last update that I did was like August. There's been a lot going on between the lawsuit and Heritage and the two gentlemen that bought the Enterprise. And I've had to wait until certain things become part of the public record by being posted, in the US court system so that I can then go officially grab a copy, pay the government for a copy of those court records, and then show them to you guys and discuss them freely without having to worry about running into issues of, information that should not be released at a specific time to the public. But I can tell you guys this. There's an aspect to this that not a lot of people have talked about. I have not talked about, okay? And that is Dusty's career. He is a storage ward. He buys and sell auctions and stuff like that. You actually are familiar with the television series Story. Dust joined that TV series about 4 years ago. He's in the last 4 seasons. They're in hiatus now. There's been no indication that the series has been canceled. And his character his partaking in that is substantial as a personality in reality TV. So there's monetary gain because he can enrich his reputation going forward based on the facts of the different things that he has discovered over those past 4 years. If you find you find a if you find Jimmy Hoffa and turn the body over to the U.S. government, the story about how you found him, well, that's worth money. So on top of that, by the way, technically he's a contractor and not an employee, but technically A&E figures into this because A&E hired him to appear in these shows because they want to be able to monetize the stories of people who find unusual things. So when they ran into a problem with Heritage trying to change the rule from, oh, instead of you putting this up to auction, we're going to literally just give it to Rod for free, and then he'll get to a finder's fee. And that arrangement and agreement was arranged between Rod and Heritage without any input from buyers. And more importantly, when everybody was there on April 1st to do that taping and all the photographs and the press releases that we saw there, court records show that Heritage knew before the people walked in the front door that the story they were going to be telling the people who had walked in and us had already fallen apart. By that point, the buyers had already said, we're not going through this. And so when they notified that of it, Heritage told them, well, we have an authentication thing that's taking place on April 1st, but you are not allowed to come to it. We don't want you here. And it was like, okay, that's kind of weird. You would think that Doug and everybody that we know would be fascinated also to ask the follow-up questions. A lot of people don't realize, but a couple of weeks back after that was Dustin that found all those Greg Jean items that we did the live stream for. So, I mean, to think that he doesn't have a story behind this is definitely wrong. But Heritage behaved in a specific way that set up the press release. We've all read it. Heritage finds the Enterprise, and they're the heroes that save the day and give it to Rod. You can go back and read the press releases a million different ways to sunrise. but you will see that the press releases are all written in a way that illustrates that, Heritage solved this mystery. And the photographs they have from that day of Joe Magdalena and Rod Roddenberry shaking hands and posing for the pictures as the two primary principals in this excluded Dustin. And by doing that, they have denied Dustin financial and reputational gain in these. So that is now part of the amended complaint with Heritage. The complaint was filed probably about 3 weeks ago. It is in the hands of the court right now. I think in December, there's going to be the first preliminary hearing. And there was a potential for a delay that didn't happen. And this is why I'll do a video for you guys. The amended complaint's like 20 some pages long. There's information in that complaint that Heritage objected to on the grounds of confidentiality. They asked the court to exclude this information because they were afraid that it showed behind the scenes things that weren't necessarily things that you and I would approve of, but they also were not 100% connected to the model. But the complaint uses those items to illustrate that this has happened before with Heritage. The court did not honor their request to keep any of that information confidential or redacted. So it's free to be discussed and is something that Heritage does not want you to see. We will have a video in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'm in no rush to do it because, quite frankly, it's not going anywhere. But there's going to be another 3-foot model bombshell legally probably right within the next 30 days. So I definitely want to get this one pushed aside before that one breaks. The court paperwork has been filed, but hasn't been published yet by the court, so we can't go into it. So, and what brought that up, as I was thinking about this, guys, was the OTOY piece, because Heritage denies that there was any filming taking place there at all. And unfortunately, our Jules uploading the video to his Twitter account and showing everybody shows that, yeah, they did film it. And the position right now from the lawyers is that they filmed without permission and all sorts of stuff. This is not going to get any better, but I do believe that the best solution for everybody at this point would be an arbitration agreement that agreed to put the model up for auction, give it to a third party like Julian's or Southby's. Julian's did an extraordinary job with a phaser and communicator just under 2 weeks ago, and then figure out legally the distribution of the proceeds between REI and the storage unit buyers. I think that's the way this is going to end up finally reaching the end, because if it doesn't, if there isn't some kind of a settlement, we've all seen how the court systems work. They'll kill it again. So there won't be an answer. I get 10 years if they don't find a way to untangle this mess. Right.
Yeah. So back to the Galileo 7, the last couple shots, you'll notice that on the outside, they show the side angle and stuff like that. So the outside, it never really had construction on the inside. So so that's why the interior set was separate, because it really didn't have an interior to it. Maybe it's a feet or two. But what's interesting is that you start the show off with 7 people, and it's the Galileo 7. So that's an interesting allegorical hint. So it's the Galileo 7 and 7 start. But it's also one of the things is that if you notice, it's just like a gold shirt died. A red shirt didn't die first. A gold shirt died. Oh, getting back to the Galileo 7, although Jim, if I could love what you just did, but here's some interesting conflict is that one of the things is that always the debate is McCoy being impertinent or are the others? And I think that the others, Bowman especially, is basically insubordinate. McCoy is not insubordinate, but he is a friend like this. And it's always that debate back and forth. Is there insubordination? And it's just like pointing out the decision-making process of Spock is being extremely logical in his approach, and normal things that should happen societally aren't happening in this one. And so Spock is caught up, and it's just like, it should logically happen this way, and it's not. So,
David, too, and we missed the scene, I believe now, but Jim several times, but there's the scene where, God, you're inside we just passed it a little bit ago. They're inside the Galileo, and McCoy and the yeoman, McCoy comes in from the back end with his phaser in hand, along with the yeoman, and you hear, just when they come in, you hear the whoosh of the doors opening, but yet they come in from the back and they come through that bulkhead. And it's like, and McCoy says, going on outside. Okay, there's no windows on the Galileo except in the front, so you couldn't see out. And secondly, there's no door in the back. So where did they come from? How do they know something's going on? Doors that they show are the main doors on the front, on the left side. So Jim and I have discussed this several times. There's no room in the back for doors. There's obviously no external doors displayed on Galileo. So it's an interesting quandary of what's going on with that scene, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting here right now is that you've got the guys in different positions. There's a great tactical positions in there.
Hey, just wanted to call and say thank you so much for such a great job you do on Trek World channel. I've been watching since you started the channel, and as someone who has seen every episode of the original series and TNG probably 30 times each, I've learned so much from your channel about the backstory of Star Trek and how it was made and the drama between the creators and the actors. I felt like I knew a lot of this stuff, but watching your channel just made me realize I literally knew nothing about my favorite series of all time. So thank you so much. Love your channel, and I hope you continue to preserve all this great information for posterity online. Thank you.
There and to demonstrate, the phaser power to these quote primitives and overwhelming firepower. Well, that should have scared them off, and even for a little bit. But it's an interesting anachronism is that that force of firepower should have scared them off and stuff like that, but it didn't. Are they truly that primitive? They may be using primitive weapons and stuff like that, basically because of the resources available. But this is a social interaction, so the society of these giants is more it seems to be more developed than that, and it's like, well, they may have overwhelming, but we have overwhelming numbers, and which is a driver's like, "We need to get off this planet," and so this forces the storyline along, and Spock, now gotta make a decision, and it's just like, "We need to get our butts out of here." Yeah.
Absolutely.
This was the tension amount in this episode was really, really up there, especially ironically, the closer you get to the end, where Spock makes a maybe not logical decision, the correct decision to take a risk. I really got the impression from watching the episode that as I went through the episode, I could feel the tension mounting, which is like completely different than something like The Enemy Within, where because they got stuck down there, the tension hits like a staccato in the very beginning, and then either rides even slowly begins to come down a little bit, but there's no wild emotion roller coaster. This one can actually wind you up as you watch it.
Agreed.
So here's an interesting point. Scotty is in this, and so looking at it, and it's just like he's using phaser to power and it's not really refueling. So here's the question: is this really powering an impulse engine, or is it partially powering building up the energy to produce antimatter again? Because the shuttle warp dry matter, and they may have enough fuel for the impulse engines and stuff like that, but here's the thing is that in order to get that, you're probably gonna need a whole lot more power. So using a phaser, that's not fueling it, where an impulse engine would need fuel. This is it charging up energy to produce more antimatter to get it out out of that and be that to, so they can get it up into orbit and then maneuver up in orbit with the impulse engine.
Manly raised a good question too. I think for me, I didn't catch it when it first aired, but obviously there was a time I watched it in syndication for the first time. Ironically, if I were to draw a conclusion based off the title, as to who the 7 were going to be. As I got older and understood more about television production, I probably would be more likely to think that it was the principal cast today than I was when I was younger, because I did not understand the concept when I was younger of what a bottle show was and why they were done. So I think that if I were reading the description today, I'd be going, "Oh, this is a bottle show." But, like you said, Manly, they you get 4 brand new characters and and it's like, okay, it's not a bottle show. It's actually spread out more. So I don't know how many original Gen 1 fans were surprised to see that the title didn't have all the characters in the 7 that you thought they would have.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There was also a question in there about it adding that post production. If you look at this shot right here, how it's hovering, that smoke is basically from a smoke generator and stuff like that. And so that's an oil based thing. And you can see in the background in the cloud how it's sticking. And so basically that's the way they produce. It's not true fog and like water fog. It's like an oil base, almost like what the old Lionel steam trains used to do and stuff like that. So it's an oil, water, other mix. And so it's hanging around in low areas. It would settle there. So that's an interesting special effect that was created for television at the time. Yeah. So good question there.
I wonder if the consistency, just because it would be larger drops or whatever. I mean, I'm thinking that there might actually yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But yes, amazing.
But it's amazing that the special effects that they use at the time, it was one of the with all the special effects, it was one of the most expensive television productions to date. But they used so much over and over again. It was at one hand very expensive, but very economical because they reused stuff and things like that. And here, you can see Leonard Nimoy picking up. He at the time very very tall and stuff like that, so he could force leverage and do a fireman carry. Or the question was it a stand-in doing that, or was it Nimoy? And after I was a firefighter for something like that, once you get somebody leveraged up like that, it's easy to carry them. So once you get them up, it's easy to carry them across your shoulders and stuff like that. And here again, you see the outlay, and you can see some of the differences between the early and later ones, and you don't see some of the strut reinforcing that you would see in some of the later ones, such as during the Babel and stuff like that, which is interesting, noticeable about that. But it's NTC 1701-7. 7 came down, yeah. Galileo 7.
There's a scene they just showed it with the stop motion. We weren't allowed to see it, but when Spock's carrying Gaetano, when Spock's carrying him, and they show the camera and Spock's weaving his way through the rocks, and they, of course, off camera they have a guy throwing the spears. There's a second spear that's thrown, and Spock, right before he throws it, Spock turns around and looks, and then turns back around and keeps going. And right after that happens, you see the spear hit one of the styrofoam rocks to the left of him. And it amazed at how close it comes to Gaetano's head as he's laying over the Spock's shoulder. They came dangerously close to hitting him in the head, but even as a prop, that spear would have done. So, TV back then, I think there was a lot less. I mean, there was choreographed stuff, obviously, but I think a lot of it was just luck, how it turned out without.
An interesting point about what we're seeing here. We've seen a couple scenes so far of the Galileo. Now, you'll see some shots in this episode. We just saw one a few minutes ago that actually showed Spock like leaning into the door from outside to look inside. The interior set was set up with end caps, the front and rear, and then several wild sections that you would be able to pull one of these 4-foot sections out, stick a camera in there and film. This was pretty much the same approach they used to filming different spots on board the Enterprise bridge in the original series. But this is what's interesting is it was not built this way, but I guess it's Fred, I'm not sure who. I mean, obviously it could have been one of the producers, but the cinematographer had a lot to do with this. They chose to show the interior set to try to explain some of the differences between the outside and the inside. And one of the ways that they tried to minimize the difference is all of the chairs are much closer to the floor on the interior set than normally, like on the bridge or whatever. The next time when I was first watching this a few moments ago, Spock's swiveling and looking at us as he's talking as the sky you ever did. And you can actually see that his feet are on the floor, and his knees are coming up, and his knees are actually slightly higher than his waist because of the fact they squatted the chairs, and they knew if they did that, it would not be as much of a visual impact if you went from one scene where it appears to be bigger on the inside than it actually is. So I thought it was really weird or really unique that they turned a limitation on the fact that the external was only a super scale model into part of their production work to try to explain or to minimize that difference. You see it here as well. I mean, the actual set itself, the centerpiece where the glass is, comes out, and you can actually see where the cameras. I have several photos of that where they have the cameras up there that were filming them. Theoretically, they could have put a camera up there and taken a shot of Nimoy or somebody standing directly up, and not and then made sure they natted out the window, the light at the top. But they chose to show a cramp on the interior sets.
Yeah, one thing that Manley just the being Galileo 7 that they carried 7, it's always assumed that the shuttles were stored, like in a deck lower or something like that. The problem is that you can also store upright, upside down, or on the ceiling. So if you relieve the gravity plate and the gravity effect on the decking, that's how we assumed it was, a positive negative. And so if you hang a shuttle upside down and stuff like that, or from the ceiling, exactly, you can increase your space area. And in a spaceship that's going through interstellar space, you don't necessarily have to have gravity around the whole thing. But also, if you look at pictures of the USS Enterprise in World War II, this is aircraft on the top end of the hangar overhead. And so everyone assumes that it was all on the floor base, and it's just like that's an assumption that not necessarily true. And you gotta admit, here in this scene, Scotty electrifying the hull, and this is Spock upholding the prime directive and things like that, not to kill somebody. And so that's interesting. But it's interesting because Spock is still holding up to the prime directive and the ideals, and then not going out and killing the creatures and stuff like that, which is an interesting plot lineage.
Yeah. Actually, too, the that scene, Boma is questioning Spock. Jim and I have talked about this before. That comes so close to its coordination that, man, if it was a more of a military, show, I would think, they'd have him up on charges or something, because he really gets hot with Spock, and it's like that's why you see Scotty stand up and go, "That's enough." Scotty's, "Hey, dude, you better stop before I step in and clock you good."
And that is one of the few characterizations that they gotten away from in season 2 and hopefully season 3. But I kind of feel a little bit that way about Ortega on Strange New Worlds. In season 1, I think that her attitude and her comments bordered on insubordination and certainly crossed the line as far as lack of respect to Pike on a couple occasions. And that's part of her character, and I understand that, but it is a military protocol vessel. And in Helltown, matter of fact, in all honesty, I think in season 2, you don't really see it much at all. I think it was just something where they were trying to flesh out the character. But that was the one characterization they did when they brought Strange New World back that I had a little bit of a difficult time accepting as being realistic. But hey, at least she wasn't a prisoner who had been guilty of murder.
Right. Well, even today in the military chain of command, voicing opinions and stuff like that is not, as long as you ultimately follow orders that are going on. But in this one, yeah, I can't, Scotty being the good officer, because Spock is about he tolerating it, but not is up to a point. But look here, it's interesting. I mean, Nimoy was, I think, I can't remember, 7, almost 7. So, but you look here and he's bending down slightly. So they're trying to do a little bit but it's still taller than the actual interior one.
Well, too, I think, David, I think the line that crosses the line with Boma talking to Spock is when somebody, Scotty or somebody, says something, he's like, "Well, I'm tired of this machine." So he actually crosses the line.
Yeah. What,
Right.
but it's interesting going up at the set tour and stuff like that. And the far on the display just past Fox station is a line up of formulas and stuff like that. And if you look at it, APU1, APU2, channel Bravo, and it's just like, oh my heavens, that's the APU power channel. I mean, it's exactly replicating what a starship would do and stuff like that. And over in the corner formulas with light speed calculations, you know, it was actually true light speed calculations. I'm looking at it going, does anybody realize what these calculations were? And it's like they're looking at me going, yeah, this is all the APUs. That's the channel output. What power and database and computer control channels are working at that particular time, and over here is your light speed calculations, and everyone's looking going, huh? It's like, oh, which was great. Everything was real. So, oh, did they share a timetable? No, when I was just up there, they did not. Says they're going.
Do you have a message that you would like to share with us and the Star Trek universe? If so, please call our user comments line and give us your thoughts.
To have to repair all that damage from the Intrepid and the display from the cafeteria. It's disassembled right now, and so they're working on a area to display it and then get it, and then so they're going to do that. And here's the shuttle liftoff from the planet. That is cool, and you got to look at it, and then the back is lit up, and it's just like, so is that part impulse or is that part? Yeah, so it's interesting.
I think as a kid, I always assumed that part was impulse and then the pods were warp. But later, the shuttlecraft only had impulse power. So I don't.
Yeah, but in was it the menagerie? I mean, they were at warp. They were chasing after the Enterprise. Yeah, I know part one and part two, and so the Galileo was repainted, relabeled as one of the ones from Starbase. And it was at warp, and it's just like, so I agree, the pods are probably mini warp and that, so
It would make sense the way the Star Trek storyline has been laid out. That would make sense that they are some type of warp drive, and that back end would be the.
oh, Paul, I think it's hopefully early 2025, I hope so.
I like this one from Manly.
It's a governor. I think it is basically the amount of plasma that can throw down the length of the pod. And so it's basically a limitation of the matter antimatter chamber, which is going to be smaller, and the amount of plasma that it can produce. And so it's basically energy output is scaled down, so they can't go that fast. And it's just like it's a motor, a V2 engine compared to Enterprise's V10 or V12 engine.
Right.
And so if you look back here, is that look at Spock calculating. Now, he is doing what we do at NASA is risk versus consequences equation. And the logical thing is just like, what's my risk here, which is interesting. And it's just like, all right, here's my risk. I've gotten to a point that my risk is pretty much laid out. We don't have enough fuel to do a whole, which, there's an argument about doing a home and burn, getting up higher and stuff like that. But here's my risk. I'm going to burn up now, or I can burn up in 50 minutes. And so now here's the consequences. I'm going to die, but can I die in a last bit effort with a signal? Right. And then there's like, and it's just like, you got to love Shatner with the camera view with the spotlight and stuff like that. The dramatic lighting is just fascinating and stuff like that.
David, as cool as the burn show effect was in the the CGI versions that you see now, I still, as a kid growing up, love seeing that distant shot and that red line for okay, was it as cool? Was it as fancy as the CGI version? No, but it was still cool when we were kids seeing that. Red line across from the back end of the shuttlecraft. Across that green planet. So cool. Yeah.
Michael brings up a good point on the work sled type of thing, because when I was growing up, I became very aware of the disconnect between some of the episodes that featured shuttles, and I mean, obviously, the Menagerie being one of them, because the implication, I don't even think it's an implication, I think it's point blank said something along the fact that that shuttle could not go to warp speed, which is why they had to go back and get it. Although it really was managing to stay pretty close to the Enterprise, which was at warp speed, which I thought was kind of weird. So my thought had been early on that the power units, which is what Matt Jeffries referred to them as, that he definitely always maintained that they were swappable. That was why they put them, at the top of the pylons and spread out. So my thought was he was talking about, of course, the Enterprise, but my thought was something similar with the Galileo or with other shuttles where there possibly could be different set of power units that they would use that would have perhaps a bigger or a different capacity need. And then that also kind of fit a little bit with the fact that whenever we do actually see through that door in the back of Galileo throughout the series, what we see on the other side, vastly different between, one episode and the next. But they just really didn't have a reason in the being used to really, I guess, to elaborate on that. But what they showed us, like Michael said, what they showed us in the motion picture at least kind of fit in with the fuzzy logic.
And the thing about it is warp drive being warping of space and stuff like that. And so it's how big a bubble you can form and stuff like that. And so if the Enterprise is going this direction, if you intersect with a bubble, it may not be, when the bubbles merge and stuff like that. So you don't necessarily have to go at the same warp speed to do an intercept course, which is interesting. It's just spatial warping and stuff like that. And so, yeah, do you need to go at warp 9 or can you intercept at warp 4 or something like that? So that's an interspatial analogy. And so even today, if you're going, a train moving this way and it can still intercept as long as you got the geographic or tangential plane at an off angle. So
Masters of or limiting on warp just remind me of a storyline from Voyager that I thought they set up that could have been interesting, like abandoned it. But there was an episode in Voyager that established that going faster than warp 5 was damaging the space time in the Delta Quadrant. So it was figured into whatever episode it was. And the workaround was don't exceed warp 5. But then it was never spoken about again in Star Trek, and we see no evidence that it occurred in anything other than the Delta Quadrant. But you would think that as a property of physics, if it occurred out there, it could have occurred here. I guess if we had it to do all over again on Voyager, it probably would not have used that idea, I think. But because I really thought that was going to be interesting, because sort of like what later happened with the spore drive, we saw that, there had to be creative limitations that you could put around some of these methods of transportation so that they weren't so miraculous just to get from point A to point B as quickly as they seem to.
the end, they're lapping the implication is that Spock used a human emotional thing. It's like, I'm not too sure that was weighing risk and consequences. And it's just like, I'm on Spock's side on this one. I think it was lots.
Yeah, also think it was logical, but I'm not sure. I know that Kuhn was still in the system at this point. I think that, and he's the one who's responsible for 99% of the things that we would look at as being lighthearted comedy in Star Trek. And he was a great storyteller. And we talked about how this episode, at least for me, ratchets the tension higher and higher and higher right up to the end of the episode. So I think that the last soft landing emotionally of the very last scene was a good idea. It was a necessary cool down, I think. I think as a result of that, I think Kuhn probably would have defended the decision even if it had been questioned, and may have been by Gene. I don't really think that that's appropriate. I think Kuhn would have still very strongly felt you have to have that moment of levity at the end after, cranking these people up for an hour.
Yeah, Jim, you bring up a great point is that, the whole system, you get a crew member dead and then you display force. Well, surprise is that, well, I got another crew member dead illogically. They should have run away and didn't. And it's just like, and so the tension is building as more and more the scenario is going, and it's just like, so we can overpower them and we show our might and blah 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 blah, and they keep coming back. and back and more frequent. And as the tension's building, it's just like, we got to get off this planet, or else we're cooked. And it's just like, because we can't overpower these. We're going to run out of energy. It's inhospitable. And so the only choice that they have is not to signal, is we have to get back into orbit and signal, or we're going to, there's no chance of survival here.
Right. Yeah, that numbers game, it's interesting. I never even considered that, David, until you mentioned it. But knowing that, of course, that, that Roddenberry had, combat and flight in World War II, and knowing that Kuhn had, a significant Korea conflict background, I think that that is also a really, really good example of how you can have superior weapon fire and superior tactics, but if the terrain you're in is unfamiliar and is hindering you, and the locals have overwhelming numbers against you, your technology and experience does not guarantee you're going to survive that encounter.
Their quality and then their quantity, and then it's just like, so the Russians have always said it's adequate enough quality, but in quantity we're going to overwhelm you. And then they espouse that to North Vietnam and stuff like that. And so they gave them complicated weapons, but in such a vast amount, but nothing, well, except for the SA-2, the surface to air missiles and stuff like that, which were very, very good. But for the most part, the US, I mean, the one Huey, they had tactical jets and stuff like that. And at one time they only had like, what, 14, 15 MiG-21s, but effectively used them in the hit and run tactics and stuff like that until Robin Old cleaned their one. But yeah, good point on Gene Kuhn, Jim. Actually, very, very, very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much, he and Watchang are like two of my heroes that have gained a lot of significance to me since coming back to this channel, because when we were younger, we didn't necessarily know the people behind the scenes. And Gene, it's just tragic, absolutely tragic.
Well, put up with so much crap from Roddenberry too, because Robert Roddenberry, like you mentioned, didn't like the humorous aspects of some of the episodes and the writing bits. Like you said, you got to. It wasn't like he injected, laughing bits into it, except for the very episode. But there was a kind of broke up some of the monotony of some of the heavy storylines and some of the writing. So I think Gene Kuhn was brilliant for what he did in the writing that he wrote for the show.
Yeah, and you got to hear David Gerald up there, and when I was up there, and how he got the Trouble with Tribbles on. Just, yeah, Gene was like, no, we're not that, we're too serious and stuff like that. But David Gerald carried that off. It had enough allegorical humor mixed with actual true humor. But it was just marvelous storytelling, and the story writers back then, I mean, they were Shakespearean. If you look at it, even the Trouble with Tribbles had Shakespeare up one side, down the other. I mean, the plays and stuff like that Shakespeare had as comedy, serious undertones. They were the Trouble with Tribbles and more Trouble with Tribbles and stuff like that David Gerald wrote and stuff like that were just phenomenal. Even the Deep Space Nine playing off of it, it added to the whole storylines and stuff.
Yeah, so I think that David being the first part of the career was exceptionally beneficial for us. The fact that he was far more quiet and willing to work with them at that age, and what we got out of it, because he, kept notes about everything. Looking back on, I don't think it could have happened any better than it did. I've never met him, but I'm looking forward to meeting him one day, because I do think that even as a writer and a fan, he was very strategically important in the years following the cancellation of the original series.
Yep. Even it's writing into the next generation. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And of course, that's another war for a different debt. Resulted, unfortunately, between him and Gene, that resulted with him and Dorothy and a bunch of other people saying, "I am done." Yeah, it just. But I also, with him and with Dorothy and with all those people that ran into that issue. Okay, Bob Justman, coming in. I'm very thankful that they obviously valued the property enough and felt enough kinship and pride for it that they disengaged at specific times, but they never truly walked away from us.
Right. Agreed.
So, all right. So for those of you who just joined, please, we have just finished our watch party. And so, as you can see, went through the 55-minute part, I guess, or 55-minute mark on Galileo 7. These watch parties happen approximately every 2 weeks, so do keep an eye on your upcoming YouTube recommendations when we launch the next one. I'm not sure which episode we'll be doing. And then for the patrons that are online, please go ahead and stay.
So now let's get up with the fun stuff, like this right over here.